just gonna pull up these questions real quick.
Whiskey from the wild Atlantic coast.
They've expanded massively as well. It's crazy. Like, have you've been over recently with their?
I haven't been over. They hounded me. I went over right as COVID broke out, right?
Wow.
So they canceled the big trade show in Germany, and I said, the heck with that. I'm still going. I'm going to go just see my suppliers. They don't want to do the trade show. I don't care. So, I had trips planned to Germany, to France, to Ireland, to see Short Cross, to at that point meet the people from Sleeve League that own Silky. As I land, my supplier and friends calls, I don't think you should come. He says, I think tomorrow the president's going to announce and close the country down. You won't be able to get out. So, next day I had my meetings in Ireland, and then it started really going crazy in Ireland.
Yeah.
And, I said, well, I've got a lot of work to do here. And then my partner back home, she said, I don't care how much work you've got to do, get home. She says, it's not going to be pretty. And the next day, Ireland closed down. So I had a hard time. I got, you can't fly back to California direct from Ireland. You got to go to London and then fly home, and it's just weird. And then on the plane home, it's like a big, gigantic plane, and like a 400-seater. There was 30 people on there.
Oh wow. That's crazy.
It's
a crazy
really
time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I managed to be there long enough to pick up Silky.
Awesome. Oh, that was your first time, like, getting there to meet them?
It was. They actually drove across over to Northern Ireland, to the east side, where Short Cross is, to meet me. James Doherty and his wife Moira, that are the founders. And interesting, kind of a reverse story of yours. Their export director, David Wood, was a sales manager for Southern Wine and Spirits in California and carried the products from my prior company at Southern there, and knew the products, and that's why he wanted to connect them to me.
Right.
And David's, so he's born, raised here. His kids are born here, but his mother is from Donegal, and he wanted to move there and raise his family, and then went after that job. And so he's not Irish at all, but boy does he really feels Irish.
Well, you mentioned your previous company, so what's the history?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background, right? So Preiss Imports, started as Eric Preiss Company in 1961. We came over from Germany. My father brought a few German specialties, some food items, some liquor items. A few years later, he became the guy that had German specialties on the West Coast. And back then, unlike today you get the whole country, right? The world's smaller. We have all the communication possibilities. Back then, it was a big world. And so you got the Western USA as an importer. It was 3 importers, and along the way he picked up Jägermeister. And so then, I came to work for him. The company started in 61. Here and there, as I got a little bit older, I helped out once in a while. It was a tiny little company. Then in 74, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I went back to help him out. So that's been 49 years now. And that helping him out at that point, got me in the business, and I started fell in love with it. So went from Eric Preiss Company. He was pretty ill around, by the mid-70s. And so in 76, he sold the company. And it was a small company. I ran it for the people that bought it. I figured I knew everything to start my own company. I wasn't brave enough to do it all alone, so I took a partner, and that company didn't make it. So we closed that in 1987, and I started the first Preiss Imports. And Preiss Imports was in existence from 1987 to 2008, when I sold it to Tony Folio and Keith Greger, who came from Sky Vodka Campari. They partnered in Sky Vodka and then sold that to Campari. And they liked the footprint we built. And so they bought the company at that point. And I was with them for a few years. And it became real clear that I'm definitely entrepreneurial and don't do real well not sharing my opinion too much. And so I got pushed out of that company, sort of, and I think that's typical. If somebody sells a business, they don't really care what your ideas are. They just liked that we had built a footprint with specialty products, and the whole cocktail thing had started coming into gear. And so something that was goofy went to being in. And so then I started Preiss Imports at that time with my wife, and but she really wanted out. So at that point, is when I looked for somebody to buy the old company, and we started this company with my daughter, who wanted one of my three kids, who had one that really wanted to be in this business. I'm not sure she knew what she was in for, but it's there, So now we're in the beginning of year 11, and it's really starting to roll. We have, I believe, we have about 57 distributors around the U.S. We're in 45 states, and we have about 40 suppliers from around the world, and about 300 products, and quite a few of them are here at Wines Unlimited.
You mentioned Jaeger. What are some of the other first products that you guys started carrying?
So when my father came over, it was very German-centric. German wines, German spirits, some German food items, pretty well-known products in Germany at the time. A product called Echte Kreuzbeere, which is old German, and Kreuzbeere is blackberry. And, so in German that would be Blaubeeren, but Kreuzbeere is old German, kind of like Gaelic, right? Old language. That was just a fantastic product, very well distributed in Germany. He brought it over here. We had another product called Stohnstoffer, which was an herbal liqueur like Jägermeister with a blueberry twist to it. Really good product. We had a couple of Steinhagers. Steinhagers were the brown ceramic bottles you might see historically. And Steinhager I guess it's a gin, but it's got only juniper berry, no other botanicals. And so typically in Germany that was consumed cold, maybe with a beer, shooter to a beer, and then eventually Jägermeister came along too. So we had quite a few of those kind of specialties. We had Escorial Green, which was very much a chartreuse-like liqueur out of Munich, Germany. These companies have all either gone away or merged. The brands disappeared, some of them are around, around Europe and things. And when I can find them, I try to bring them over and kind of put them back into circulation. So we have a mix of that historical and the newer things. A big part of my father's business was German wines in the early days, and that's really kind of how I fell in love with the business. As I started with him, he sent me to Germany, and I visited the wineries, and I just go, this is amazing. And so for about 20 years, I beat my brains out on wines, and wines are very tough, very, very difficult business, and gotten more and more difficult as time has gone on, because big players buy entire vintages, the Total Wine and Moors or Specs in Texas. You guys don't have huge chains here, so it's not as much of a problem in Louisiana. But overall it's really difficult if you haven't lined up wines that have a given demand for that wine. So German wines in the early 80s tanked, and then at that point I tried New Zealand wines, and then those got sold to Treasury, and I said, okay, this is just not going to be a winning proposition, and we really started focusing on spirits. And in the prior Preiss Imports, because big companies were getting rid of brands, we picked up really some amazing spirit brands, Luxardo being one of them. There was numerous brands. We picked up Mandarin Napoleon that had been beat into the ground by the big guys, and they didn't want it anymore. So all these spirits became stepchildren, right? So then as I started this company, I figured, well, everybody knows me for specialty spirits, but what was happening was that everybody had jumped into the game. So while the last company, I was able to pick up those brands, and then slowly as the cocktail thing and the spirit thing took off, we were in the right place at the right time, and this company we were chasing. And so it was actually a lot harder, this company. But we've made it over that hump, and back in, back into doing what we like to do. We work with family companies. At this point, I don't have, as a supplier, I don't have any corporate supplier. They're all privately owned brands, companies. Doesn't mean we won't ever have one, but I haven't found one that is reasonable to work with.
Just another question leading on, you're talking about, family owned and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about the history with the Martin family and where that all originated from?
So I'm not exactly sure when my father met, Cedric's father, David, but they met before I started with my father and brought Jägermeister here. Actually, what my father brought here was Soldica Pisco. At first we had a hand-painted Indian-faced bottle, and then it became more of an Inca bottle, frosted black, and Cedric remembers that real well. With Jägermeister, it was a little, because of the licenses that Martin had, they could function across all channels, so I believe they probably ordered some from my father. But when the brand ended for us under our contract and went to Sidney Frank, and they were going to put a lot of money in, that's when I went to David and I said, you really need to hang on to that brand. And New Orleans became kind of ground zero because they had all kinds of wacky, tattooed guys with mohawks, things that were not common back in the 70s, and they had them in ads, and I drink Jägermeister because, I got 8 piercings, just really crazy. They were running those in Germany already, and in the UK, and in Italy, but it was just starting here, and they were very wacky approach to promoting the product. So I really desperately wanted to hang on to it. I worked with Sidney Frank as a broker for about 3 years, and then they gave me a check and said, hey, you want to do your own company, go home. And then that was the end of Jägermeister. But it kind of cemented things in this business, and a lot of people for a long time remembered that.
What created this interest in wanting to work with these specialty products?
Well, I think, mostly because you're privately owned, it's just us. It was just always my family. You sell things you want to sell. So, and eventually as I evolved in the business, I look at it more strategically, about for categories, for opportunities. If I look around this room, I can see where you have, and in my mind it starts rolling what would fit in, because it's always about how do you start with a business. If I come in here and then offer you something you've already got 30 of, maybe there's a chance, maybe there's not, there has to be a reason to give us a chance to get in, Sometimes it's easy. Mickey reached out for me, and I started back in with Martin Wine with single cask, single malt, single cask strength whiskey, and Howard promoted those, for us for a little while. They were always pre-sales because you have a single cask to sell, and so Howard would run that, and then Katie came in and we did a little bit more, and then once Mickey came in, he's very much intent on building out the specialty spirit book, and so it's become a lot more serious. So I didn't have to come here and try to figure out how to get in. Also historically we had the connection, but that's how we approach it. And a lot of, I have 57 distributors. They don't carry everything. We have some distributors that do. Then we have states, like in Louisiana, I do have International Wine Spirits, and I have you guys, and the portfolio is huge. And there's a lot of things you already have that you wouldn't need from me again. Doesn't mean they're not different, but you have to then, build out a category even further. So in some states like New York, we have 6 distributors because you just have to have products that fit what their need is. So that's really a pretty important component, and that component, of course, also carries over into salespeople. Always try to say, hey, if an account has 45 mezcals, maybe that's not the first place to start talking to them. Maybe one just talk to them about the modifiers that they can make great cocktails with the mezcal with, type of thing. Something we might have something unusual in that's at this company.
How many products would you say that you have in your portfolio?
At least 300, probably another 100 in the works.
Do you have like a specific favorite niche product that y'all carry?
Not really. It's things I hated. Back in the late '80s, I didn't like whiskey at all. As you start selling it, it's funny how you start liking it. Ron Cooper came to me twice to buy his company, Del Maguey Mezcal, and the first time I definitely didn't like the product and the numbers didn't make any sense. The second time I kind of questioned, is there a category there? But numbers still didn't make any sense. Obviously eventually Pernod Ricard bought the brand and figured out there's something there. And so, I also grow into things as different categories evolve. And that's where, when you're small, you're able to be flexible and move fast. You're able to chase something if you're not going through 30 onion layers to get somebody to sign off and let you do it. So that's somewhat of an advantage. Disadvantage is you have a lot of inventory. Maybe too much.
You work with family-owned companies, and all of your companies have also been essentially working with family. Was that always intentional, or like?
It evolved that way, especially because we started on the wine side, and all the spirit companies my father started with and that I continued with for a long time, they just happened to be family owned, and that was very common. Diageo was United Vintners and Distillers at that time, and there were a lot of small companies that, they started buying, eventually bringing them under one umbrella. And so it was really very common, I think, at that point. As I matured in the prior company and with this company, it became intentional. And we do get, corporate players that approach us all the time. They tend to be, by their nature, not very flexible. It's this way, or, what, we want you to have the product. I go, yeah, but, we have to do this or that. And they go, no, it's this way, and that's it. And so it's hard to imagine where we fit into that kind of thinking. They're not really looking for entrepreneurial, they're looking for very procedural companies that kind of have a hammer and go into the distributors and say, you got to buy this, and we're going to be shipping you, a pallet or a container and things. And of course, they can do that. They have very large contracts and commitments. So we have to sell everything. We can't, Diageo or Pernod or Beam Suntory create a new product. Every distributor is going to get it. They'll have done their market research and they'll say, hey, this market's going to do this and that market's going to do that. And then they ship it, you're buying it. And so we don't have any of those advantages. Similar to Wines Unlimited versus, RNDC or Southern Glazers, they bully their customers.
So out of all the products you carry, is there one you'd like recommend for people trying to get into different kinds of like spirits? Stuff like that. You
mean a specific product I'd recommend? I get that. That's similar to the question that, which one's your favorite? And I go, well, that's like saying, I've got 5 kids, or which one's your favorite kid? The products are so different, right? It's really hot and I want a gin and tonic, it'd be one thing, I'm having a cigar, it's after dinner, it's later in the evening, maybe I want a whiskey. So it really is depending on the atmosphere, the time of day, where you're at, and if I'm eating Mexican food, do I want a margarita? Personally, I like a caipirinha made with cachaça, but some people like a margarita better. So it really kind of, it's very flexible, and that's sort of the beauty. And the other beauty of all the products we carry is that just about any cocktail can be created using brands that we bring in. And I enjoy things like a Vieux Carré here and there. I like a Manhattan, but we can make a lot of variations of a Manhattan. And you can make a lot of variations of different tequila cocktails or different cachaça cocktails. Certainly gin, and the gins we've got a pretty substantial gin portfolio, and the gins work in different ways. Some make a great dry martini, others are way better with an India tonic or something. So it really varies, and I think that's sort of, it kind of spoils you, but it's sort of like you wouldn't go and eat exactly the same meal every day. Might be your favorite, but every once in a while you gotta shift.
And you mentioned a bunch of cocktails that would be great to make with your products and that you like. Do you have a specific summer cocktail that's like your go-to?
Quite often, because of course you're doing it when you're entertaining, it's either gonna be a caipirinha or a margarita. People love when I make the margaritas because we have good tequila, so they love when we do it with that. Anytime they're not so familiar with caipirinhas, I make a caipirinha, they go crazy. They just go, wow, I had no idea. I definitely enjoy a gin and tonic. Definitely, it's just a very hard cocktail to beat for refreshing. So you can play around with it a little bit. You can add a little bit of bitter liqueur, like the Tubé bitter that you guys carry from us, just a little bit of that, or a little bit of more, orange liqueur you guys carry from Mexico. Just a little tiny bit, just kind of change the composition and the flavor profile.
You've had a relationship with the Martin family, so you've been to Louisiana and New Orleans quite a bit.
Yeah,
right?
actually, I've been coming to Louisiana since the 70s. Not totally frequently until Tales of the Cocktail, when Ann Tunerin, who founded that festival, because we had Luxardo at that time, so they were chasing us. She really wanted us to be part of it. And so I finally, back in 2008, started coming to Tales of the Cocktail. I've been coming every year since then. And that's gotten me more involved. And, I've also, it was just great going out yesterday and the day before with Wines Unlimited people and seeing the accounts, seeing the reception you have. It's nice to see that the spirit division here of Wines Unlimited is really unfolding in a very positive way around town.